well, hello everyone. My name is Josh Knox. I'm going to present to you tonight a little bit about AWS and about Python. Really excited. First of all, let me ask a couple questions here. So how many of you are familiar with AWS? You use it a lot? Okay. How many of you have a little bit of experience? Maybe you've signed up for a free tier, you know? Okay. How many of you have never touched AWS ever? How many of you don't know what it is? Okay, all right. Tonight I'm going to talk about trying to integrate AWS services with Python, two things that I absolutely love. Like I said, I'm Josh Knox. I'm an automations engineer at Kinney Group. So what does that mean? I don't know. Some days it's Python, some days it's Bash, some days it's AWS, some days it's VMware. I never know. I just do it. I prefer Knox, so just call me Knox. Makes me happy. My love affair with computers started a long time ago. I bought my first computer when I was in 6th grade. Some of you affectionately call these trash 80s, TRS-80 Model 3. I paid $50 for it when I was in 6th grade of my own money because I wanted it, and I've been trying to compensate for it ever since. So that's what I've worked up to over the years from my $50 start. Let's see here. The best way to learn, you guys have probably heard this statement many times, to learn, insert language, software, etc. here, is to work on a project. So what better kind of project to work on than cats? Cats are amazing. And this is at Twitter. If you go to that Twitter right there, Zonk DP, that's Knox spelled backwards, by the way, if you hadn't caught that yet. It's my cat Twitter, and I think I broke 5,000 tweets doing this project, and it's not from this project, it's because every time I do some kind of weird proof of concept, I end up tweeting cats to this Twitter account from sources. So I ended up, you saw at the beginning there, I kind of used that Tron reference. Any of you that are my age in the room know and love Tron. So I thought to myself, we're going to take in all the cats. We're going to grab all the cats and scrape them and bring them in. And so I decided to name my project the Master Control Program, the MCP from Tron, because it's trying to bring in all the cats. Again, that our Tron fans like me are getting the reference. So very quickly, I'm going to explain the project, and then we'll break it down into pieces. So here we go. You've got the MCP. It's on a CentOS 7 running Python 3.6. It is going to hit AWS. Then it's going to create a server. Then it's going to go to Reddit, and it's going to rip the cat subreddit. Then it's going to store a bunch of junk in DynamoDB. Then it's going to run everything through Rekognition, which is AWS's image recognition software, which allows you to see what's in a picture. We want no people, because ripping pictures of people from Reddit and putting it on Twitter is creepy. Ripping pictures of cats from Reddit is cool. So no people, just cats. So then once we get that finished, we're going to store the cat pictures on S3, because you never know when you're going to need those cat pictures again. Then we're finally going to send them to Twitter, and we have cats. So that is going to be the project. Now, did I tell you that we're going to do the whole thing with one script from home base? Now we're going to copy a couple scripts to that server. Start with one script at home base. So let's talk a little bit about what is required. Missing a slide, but that's all right. So let's talk a little bit about what's required done. So again, with AWS, the very first thing you have to do is get your account set up. If you have not done that before, I would encourage you to go and set up an account on AWS. They are very generous and give you a free tier of almost every service, and it lasts for a year. I am out of that year, and I am having to pay them now, but it's fine. So what you're going to want to do is you need to go in, and you have to create programmatic access for your Python script. So you're going to have to go into AWS, you create a user. As you see here, I made an IndyPy user, and you see that programmatic access there. That's what you want. And when you do that, you're going to get a couple of keys, and those are what you're going to put in. So you're going to need the AWS Commandline. So I put up here, now I don't know for sure if these will work. Try them, and if they don't, go to Google. But you got, apt install, yum install, brew if you're on a Mac, and Windows, I don't know, I mean, you're using Windows? I mean, sorry. All right, so if you are using Windows, you actually download an actual installer for the AWS Commandline. You are absolutely correct. Yeah, and I always forget to mention that, but
yeah, can you repeat that for the recording?
Yeah. Yes, we're going to repeat the fact that you can use the and then I cut out the Linux subsystem for Windows or the Ubuntu optimized like. Yeah. Yep. So you can do that as well, and then once that is set up. You're going to use this command right here, AWS configure, and it'll ask you to put in those keys that you got. So you're going to put them here. And then very important, because you'll learn this the hard way if you don't pay attention to it, is that region. Okay? Certain services are in certain regions. So if you go into AWS and you spin up your server in, West, US West 1, and then you come here and you put in programmatic access for US East 2, it's not going to work. So you've got to make sure those regions are matched up. Also, another point, I did not do this for this project because I didn't need it, but if you need to have more than one AWS account on a single machine, you can set up profiles, and you can specify the profile in your code. So if you do need to have one script pointing at US West, and you need another script pointing at US East, you can set up a profile and then in your code have each script point at whichever one they need. I don't hear that talked about very much, but that is an option. And then, of course, whatever output format you want. All right, and then all I have here is that you're going to need Boto3. Now, this is a big point of contention. It is pronounced Boto3. I did pull up several YouTube videos last night. I did verify and listen to people actually say it out loud, and they said Boto3, because I've heard people say other things. Boto3. You'll need that library for your Python. All right, so let's just jump. Yeah, I want to get out of this. I want to get out of here and get into some code and actually show you a little bit about what's going on, if we can get out. Oh man, all right, we successfully escaped PowerPoint. Let's see what we can do now. Okay, so I'm gonna jump over here. I have this up on, this is GitHub. See there, JR Knox 1977, MCP. So I've got this up there. You've got 3 scripts that we're gonna talk about real quick. We're gonna start off with MCP here. All right, so, forgive me, this is a 2-weekend job here, this project. So there's a few things I'm not happy with, and Calvin's correct when he talks about part 2. We'll get the Alexa integration into part 2. That'll be fun. So I used ArtParse. I've got Boto3. I've got config parse. I've got logging. I've got this nifty Splunk handler because I'm from Kinney Group, and if I didn't use Splunk in the project somewhere, that would be terrible. I've got to use it. And then we have collections. We just needed that for something. So if you've never used Boto3, I'll stop scrolling and making everybody crazy. You have to set up your resource. So you see I had a S3 equals a Boto3 resource. I've got EC2 equals Boto3 resource EC2. The Boto3 documentation is extensive, and almost every service in AWS they have some kind of connector for. So you've got to go in there and figure out exactly what you need depending on what service you're trying to connect to. But literally just about every service has got some kind of connector back to Python. It's going to be a lot of really fun JSON, so get ready. Next, I have here, so I have some parameters that you have. So if you're gonna spin up an instance in EC2 remotely through Python, there's a lot of things to consider. I mean, you can make it as easy as just create instance. There's a command that we're going to look at here in a minute, but there's also a ton of different parameters that you can put in to automate this. So the first thing here is I have an instance name. I have the AMI. You've got to know what you're going to use. So you can see here in my comment, I tried CentOS 7 first. But CentOS 7, I was having issues getting all the different packages and the different things that I needed to run this project. So I decided instead to go with the Linux, the Amazon Linux. So I went with that instead. I got a T2 Micro. I'm actually thinking about taking that down to a Nano. There's not that much cost savings on that, but this is running 3 scripts. That's all it's doing. It's not doing much at all. You have to have a role. So in AWS, everything requires permissions, everything. And I would encourage you, if you start to dive into AWS, don't skip over IAM, the Identity and Access Management. It is a big rabbit hole, and if you try to avoid it, you'll regret it later because things won't work right and you won't understand why, and you've got to go and play with those permissions. Or you do what a lot of people do, and you just give everything admin access, and everything's fine. Right? Yeah, it's fine. Just give everything admin, and you don't have to worry about permissions. It's a great thing. So there's that. So then I have ArtParse here because what I wanted to do, we'll get back to a slide in a minute. One of the things I had to conquer was how do I get my keys to my Twitter app and the keys to my Reddit app to the EC2 instance without exposing them in my code. So we'll get to that in a minute, but part of that is I have this configuration file that we're going to grab through ArtParse here. So you can see it's looking for a configuration file, and I am really mean about it down here, and if you don't put that configuration file in, we just exit. We're done with you. You give me a configuration file or we're done. Here's the config parse. These are all the things that I needed. I needed the client. So I needed the, like I said, the Reddit, the access tokens, the Twitter tokens, the Splunk tokens, because I'm also sending all these logs back to Splunk. Let's take a gander at that right now. Let's see if it's still going. Oh, and of course it's giving me an error right now. No results at this time. There we go. So this is my, I have Splunk hooked up to the logging. So all the logs on the server are being sent back to home base. And I'm getting them through Splunk. Let's go back to the code. There's that Splunk handler. I just have to know my Splunk host, my Splunk port, the token for that API that we learned about earlier, and I get information. If you're not using logging, yes, sir? Oh, man, I'm glad you asked. What is Splunk not? No, Splunk is a software to be able to take in any kind of data, and then from this data, you're able to gather analytics. So you can take in log files. You can take in, what I'm doing here is this is direct HTTP connect of log files from out in the cloud. You can take data from CSV files. It doesn't have to be like a log data. We have use cases where we take other kinds of data and just do straight up data analytics. A lot of people like to use it for security. They hook up all their logs to it and they watch for different security protocols. So it just becomes a one-stop location to be able to send all your data to, have it in one place, and be able to aggregate it, create dashboards, monitoring, remediation, all that kind of stuff in one place. So it's a tool. I'm just using it for cats tonight. So logging, as I was about to say, if you are not using logging in your Python code, start using logging. You will never use the print command again. You will hate the print command once you get used to logging. I over the last several months, have become a big fan of logging, and not only that, but as you can see here, I have it logging to 2 places. So I have the scripts logging to this terminal, but then I also have, because this terminal is actually logged into the EC2 instance, and then I also have all of the logs going all the way back to home. This is my server that is set up at my house in Greenwood, and I'm just VPN'd into it from here. So that's what's fun about this, because you can orchestrate this stuff, and you can have all the information from it coming all the way back to home base. And if you've got things going on in the cloud, theoretically, you could have things going on in Azure, in AWS, and in Google Cloud. They could all be hooked up to Splunk, and they could all be sending the data back. All right, so here's the really fun part I wanted to get to here. So one of the options that you have when you start a EC2 instance is this user data. So let's scroll down first. We'll look at this first. Create EC2 instance. So if you want, I'll step back here and look at it with you. And yes, I do have a laser pointer. All right, so you create the EC2 instance. I've got a little logger here. And then you start getting to give it all the different parameters. Now, again, this is not all the parameters. There are more parameters than you can shake a stick at in Boto3 that you can put on here. But I went ahead and just put on, I've got the ID image, which we already had at the top assigned, minimum count, maximum count, because you can deploy entire fleets of machines at one time. I've got my instance type, key name, user data. Now that seems really simple right now, doesn't it? Look at that. See how nice that is? Self.userdata. No problem. You just wait until we go back up to the top. Network interfaces, this is a big deal. So with this network interfaces, little JSON you're passing in here, this is the subnet that I wanted it on. So you can assign what subnet you want it on. You assign the security group or groups, plural, that you want it to have. If you don't understand what a security group is in AWS, it is basically the local firewall for the machine. So it's how you open up your ports. Associate public address, in this case, true. Now, once I get this project completely running and I feel really comfortable with it, I'm going to be able to turn this to false. I don't need a public IP address on this server. I do have an internet gateway on this VPC, the virtual private cloud, but I don't need it to have a public IP because once I get everything done, this thing's going to be a little black box. It just spins up, the code starts, it starts talking to Twitter and Reddit, and that's it. I should never have to theoretically touch it. And if something really goes wrong, who cares? I'm going to destroy it, and I'm just going to spin up another copy. That's the goal. Down here, you have the role, and we talked about that before. The role is because this EC2 instance is going to be talking to DynamoDB, which is Amazon's version of MongoDB. It's going to be talking to S3, and so it's going to be talking to recognition. So it needs some permissions to be able to use those services, or it won't be able to. The tag specifications are way more difficult than they should be. It's funny, you like Google this, you're like, I just want to name my machine. I just want my poor machine to have some name so when I go into the AWS console, I can find it. And it's this weird, all of that, just to say the name of my computer. So I don't know. I don't know why they made that one that difficult. So there it is, that's that. Now, let's talk about this user data right here, okay? Here's what user data is. User data is a way for you to pass in a startup script to the EC2. So on startup, it will run this script. And you see here what I have to kind of do in Python to make it happy and make it basically kind of simulate passing in a bash script. So it starts off with bash. I've got my yum updates, my yum upgrade. I installed Python 3.6, which, by the way, that was the #1 reason I chose the Amazon Linux, was because they have Python 3.6 in their repositories, and it just loads right up. I mean, no problem. When I did CentOS, I had to try to add EPEL, and I had to try to jump through these other hoops, and it was just a pain to try to remotely, with this script, get Python 3 set up. Now, I could have used Python 2. No, I went with Linux, with the Amazon Linux. So one of the other things I learned the hard way, because I'd never tried to do this before, the first time I did it, I just tried to run pip, just straight pip. Every time it errored. Every time it would not take it from a script. I could run it from the command line, but the script just didn't like it. So I have learned it is much safer to do this little guy right here with the Python M pip install. Much safer. It worked every time perfectly. I was able to get all the packages I need. So I needed Boto3, I needed Tweepy, I needed PRA, and I needed PSUtil. PSUtil started throwing errors when I added it. I had to do some Googling again, and I found out that I needed this GCC package, and once I put that in, everything was fine, and it started working. From there, so what I've got going on here, see all these environment, I'm doing this little echo command, and I'm passing it to etc environment. I'm going to show you what that is real quick. So let's go back to the PowerPoint, and we're going to start from this slide. So one of the things I really wanted to try to do on this project was I would always hear guys say things like, well, you need to pass your stuff in through environmental variables, that's safer, and then it's not in your code, and blah, 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 and then they would just keep talking, though. And I'm like, wait, dude, like, how do you do that? You need to pass it in the environment. Okay, well, how? So this is what we're going to try to do here, by the way. So you notice it says using Boto3, the EC2 create instance user data parameter, we can pass variables directly to the EC2 instance OS by setting environmental variables in the startup script. So go all the way back to that configure, the config parse file that I put at the beginning. Remember I said you've got to have a configuration file to pass in when we start the script. In that configuration file, you're going to put all the little bits that you need. Config parse is going to read your configuration file and is going to populate all your variables on the initialization of that class, right? Then, so you got that right there, class variables, self equals stuff, whatever it is. Then it's going to pass them into your EC2 instance, and that's awesome. Because literally your EC2 instance is going to come alive with these environmental variables already ready. And all you have to do when you get to your other scripts is you have to read them. So we'll hop out of here. Maybe we'll hop out of here. There we go. And let's jump to one of the other scripts real fast. So this is one of the scripts. It's called rip Reddit. And it is going to be passed. It's one of the ones that's copied up to the EC2 instance. So a lot of the same stuff here. It sets up the Splunk logging. It sets up the regular logging. It sets up S3 because it needs to talk to S3. It sets up this duplicate process protection that I wrote. The Reddit info, and here it is. So the Reddit info, it's grabbing from os.environment client_ID. So during the startup script, we passed the information to the EC2 instance. Now the super cool thing about these EC2 instances is you can't SSH into them by default without having your PIM file. So you've got to have your actual key to SSH into it. So that really locks this guy down to begin with. So you're already locking it down with the fact that you've got to have your key to even log into the thing, and then you're also storing everything in the environmental variables as well, and so it's not in the code. If you're storing the code in Git or you're doing something like that. One of the things that I want to add to this as I move forward is I really want to get Git integration so that when this guy goes live every time, he actually pulls his code from Git on startup, and then that way every time I update my code, everything's great, and then I can have dev cats and production cats, and that'll be awesome. If I was mean, I'd make the dogs the dev class, because I'm just not a big dog guy. But anyway, we'll move on before we get in trouble. All right, so before we get too much further, any questions so far, by the way? There's a lot. I realize there's a lot going on here. Yeah, and that's one of the things I was going to point out that. Oh,
yeah, can you repeat that, please?
So the question was, I have like the subnet and the security group hard-coded, and I'm a bad boy. I should not have done that. In my eagerness to get this project completely done, I didn't do everything like I probably should have. But you are absolutely correct. If you set up your configuration file correctly, and theoretically, you could have more than one configuration file, right? So you could have a configuration file that's just for your app keys, and then you could have another configuration file that's just for all your AWS information, and you could separate those out. The code would look for both, but you could keep them separated and actually change based on whatever you're doing. Does that answer your question? Yeah, the real answer to that question is I was bad and a little lazy and didn't do that. Also, when I made this, another point I'll tell on myself, I really wanted to make this completely modular so that when you start it, it wouldn't matter whether you said cat or dog or whatever, and it would just go to, you could just say this subreddit and this Twitter account, and it wouldn't care what you did. In the course of writing the whole thing and trying to get it done, I kind of, you'll see my log files and stuff say like, I tweeted this cat. So I put things in there like that. So I realized later I was shooting myself in the foot and not making it as reusable as I wanted. All right, so the last things we'll say about this. So right now all I'm doing is I'm just copying from S3. So I copy from S3 to temp. That was just the easiest folder to copy to right off the top of my head. So I'm copying the Reddit rip and I'm copying the tweet.py into the temp folder on the EC2. I also just went ahead and created that log, and to be honest, one of the reasons I do that is because I do that little touch. Obviously, it's going to make the log file on its own, but it's one of those things where if I log into the EC2 instance immediately before everything has had a chance to go, I get some instant gratification, and I know for sure that that thing ran. The other thing that I do is I immediately drop into the EC2 and do a cat on that Etsy environments. And then I know immediately if those environmental variables got set correctly or not. So the next problem I had was, how do I get my script started? I mean, I've got scripts up there. I've got a machine up there. They need to start. So the only thing I could come up with was, well, I guess I'll set a cron job, and it'll just start them. Now, the problem, there's a big problem with this immediately, but before we get to that, so I went and Google is your best friend, and some amazing people, when I Googled this, had this awesome one-liner to create the cron job right there in a one-liner, which is what I needed. And again, I checked it, and it works perfect. So if you want to steal that, that's on my Git there. Now, yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, I am right now. I mean, if you were worried about that, you could change it. Again, I didn't worry about that so much because, again, it's a black box. It's already inside a security group, inside a subnet, inside of, my AWS. And if they really want to steal my cat code, I didn't care. Everybody needs cats. So there's the cron. Now the problem immediately was, obviously, I started getting more than one instance of my Python script immediately. So I really was getting a lot of cats really fast the first time I ran this. And so I had to think of some creative ways to fix that problem. Now, again, even before this talk started, I was talking with my good friend Denver as I laser point his shirt. And Denver even came up with a little better idea than what I did. But just to explain it real quick, so what I do is when these guys start up, they just place a file. I have a file that they just place saying, look, I exist. Here's this file that proves that I exist. And then I also have them, how am I doing on time, Calvin? Okay. Oh, man. Well, about what I figured. I did barely get through EC2. We haven't even got to DynamoDB or any of that stuff yet. So what I had to worry about was this duplication. So my just real quick and dirty thing was this duplication protection where I have these little PID file, and then you notice I have the buddy file. So there's two scripts running, so I made the buddy file. I put that psutil module in here, and that lets me look for Python processes, but the problem is that what it comes back with is, yes, there's a Python process running. Well, that's great, but which one is it? Python. How many Python are running? 2. What are they? Python. Like, oh, come on. And I Googled and tried to find some way. If you guys know some trick to get PS utils to actually give me the name of the script, that's what I needed, but I wasn't getting it. So I guess I just have to check if there's only one Python process running and not 2. And if I'm running and I check and there's only one running, that means my buddy script has died. And so I'm going to delete his PID file that I set for him. And then when the cron rolls around, he'll get restarted. And it's working. It's working pretty well, actually, because when you're scraping stuff like this, you never know what's going to cause it to crash. I've had some weird stuff happen that's caused some crashes, and this kind of helps it resurrect from the dead.
So Josh, there's
Yes.
there's a module called setProcTitle for
Yeah.
Python, and you can actually set the process title to whatever you want other than Python.
See, I knew that if I just asked the question, you guys would be able to help me out. So why is what a separate process? Any of it?
Because of the GIL.
Well, the biggest reason that I did do 2 scripts to start off with is because my Reddit is a stream, and I was like, okay, it's a stream, I'm just gonna let it run and do its thing, and I don't really care. And I actually have considered the Twitter, I'm about to turn it into a dying process, if you know what I mean. Like, I really want the Twitter to just run and die. For one thing, recognition is expensive. So just yesterday in testing all this, I racked up $5 with just recognition yesterday, which does not sound like a lot, but if that's every day, I don't love the cats that much. I mean, they're not $5 a day, love. That's not it. So I've had to extend the time to where now it only tweets. If you notice tonight, it's tweeting about every 5 to 10 minutes. Last night, I tested, and I very easily put some variables in there, and now I can stretch it out to 40 or 60 or every 2 hours or whatever I want, and then I only have to pay 50 cents a day and not $5 a day for my cats. So anyway, the point is, I lost my point. I was so worried about paying for the cats. Yeah, so that's what it was, Twitter. So Twitter, I want it to just run and die is what I think I'm going to do. And if I put it on a cron, if I put it on a cron and just let it run once every 10 minutes, I don't really have to worry about it crashing anymore. It just runs and does its job and goes away and just comes back. So that may be the way I end up going with it. All right. So in my last 10 minutes here, just to give you a little bit, you'll have to come back for the part 2 to hear a lot of the rest of it. But we stream from Reddit. Let's go back to the PowerPoint again. And I'll just talk to you about a couple of the things here, and then we'll let you guys ask some questions. So one of the things I've learned about DynamoDB is that it is really finicky, really finicky. Maybe I'm just not doing it right, but if you pound it, if you are just sending a lot of data to it quickly, it'll just miss things. And you open it up, and there's just holes in your data and things that it just didn't record. So I remembered from my AWS training that there are read-write limits on it, and if you're just like me and you're cheap and you don't really want to pay a lot for your cats, then it's not really going to read everything. You'd have to pay to get that read-write speed up. One of you guys knows what that's called. I'm forgetting what it is, but there's a way you allocate that. So what I did, because remember, when this is really running in reality, I really want it to be like 30 to 60 minutes between a tweet. So we're not in a hurry. We're patient for the cats. So what I started doing was every time I updated my DB or every time I updated an item, I just put sleep for 5 seconds. So I have it sleep for 5 seconds, write another thing to the database, sleep for 5 seconds, write thing to the database, and it's really annoying, but it works. And then all of my data started coming through in DynamoDB without any problem at all. So pick your battles. If you are okay with that, and that's the kind of database you need that's not, hitting it really hard, DynamoDB might be for you. By the way,
But there's also an expense issue there too.
Well, and that's what I was just going to say. I've been using DynamoDB this entire time on this project, and I paid $0. I have not hit the threshold for any cost whatsoever on DynamoDB in the 2 weeks I've been working on this project. So, and I'm hitting it pretty hard sometimes because I'm letting it just go full throttle, and that's fine. Recognition, they'll get you. The database, I think they want you to use it because I think they know that you got to wait 5 seconds. So they're like, well, we'll just make it cheap since it doesn't work that well. So anyway, so that's where this is at. And if you go to this Twitter right here, this is the cats. Like I said, there are over 5,000 tweets on it of cats from like 2014 because it's my favorite thing to do when I start a new project is just somehow make that like a Rube Goldberg kind of thing to make more cats to this Twitter. One of the things, a couple of things that I want to add to it as I keep going forward. The next thing is I want to get some Alexa in this. One of the things that would be really easy to do is to set it up so I can ask her for statistics. I'm already splunking it, so I could, have some statistics and say, Alexa, how many cats have we tweeted in the last day? And she would say, there have been 18 cats in the last day, and they were cute. Whatever it is that she tells me. And then I could actually make it where she could exterminate the cats, like, Alexa, kill the cats. And, not kill them. Right. Alexa, shut the cats off. And then she could shut down the whole thing. She could delete the EC2 instance and shut it down. I already have a script that does that. She would just execute it. I could also have her, same thing, initiate the whole thing. So I could have Alexa start the cat flood or whatever you want to call it, start the cat Twitter, and she could do that. So that would be another way, and Lambda would be an excellent choice for that because when you have the Alexa, when you need to execute those commands, since those commands are just going inside AWS anyway, Lambda can execute them for you. So that's one of the other things I want to add to it. One of the other things I've thought is I could make a little Flask website for it, and then I could actually have like a little button, and I could, maybe in my Flask I could post like, here's the most recent cat that got tweeted inside my little Flask page, and some stuff like that. So the sky's the limit. It's Python. So the sky's the limit with what we can do with these cats. If you want to fork the project and start working with me, sure. We'll get more cats on Twitter somehow. So anyway, any questions? Yes, sir. Yes, absolutely. He asked if we could get around it and use SQLite. But the problem was the presentation was not Python and SQLite. The presentation was Python and AWS. So I literally, I kid you not, I was about 3/4 of the way through this, and I thought to myself, I could just set up a SQLite, and I thought, I need to force myself to use DynamoDB, and I did.
We have a couple questions up on the board if you want to get those.
Can this run from a Lambda function? Yes, most likely. I haven't tried it in a while. The problem, sometimes when you're trying to pull images into a Lambda and then try to save them to S3, there's some weird stuff. So as long as you could figure out a way to get Lambda to be happy with transferring the image, that's the problem I've run into before, is it gets really picky about it because you're usually trying to go straight from Lambda to S3. So if you think about it, it's really a file. When I'm doing it from local, when I use the URL lib, it pulls it, immediately saves it. So when I call the S3 function expects a file and moves it. But in Lambda, it's still just kind of a thing in memory. So let's see. Is the open source license used? I believe it is, yes. You'll have to check GitHub and make sure what I put on it, but I don't even remember right now. And yes, alternative database like Postgres, you could use any database you want. Again, I just wanted to prove that you could keep it all within the AWS service structure. Yes, sir. With what? With saving it to the server? The only reason I did it that way was because I just immediately used the URL lib and it just grabs it and pulls it down. And it was already saved, so I didn't care. And I also remember, it's just an ephemeral server. I don't really care. And I had it copied S3 anyway. So I was just going quick and dirty. There probably are many, much more elegant ways to get the cats on Twitter. But yes, sir. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. If you watch any of, I know Linux Academy and I know Cloud Guru. I know for a fact that I remember when I went through Cloud Guru's training, like the very first thing they do is walk you through how to set all that stuff up. So, and I believe those first couple lessons are even like free most of the time. So, yeah, definitely when you set up the free account on AWS. In fact, usually on the IAM homepage, there's like a little quick list of things that are best practices that you should do. And one of those is to set up MFA on that, what am I trying to say, that actual, root account.
There's a couple more questions up on the board. Actually, if you guys didn't know, you can upvote questions as well through the Slido app.
All right, how many EC2 instances did you nuke? I don't even know. I don't know, man. I felt so bad. I mean, these instances would not even get a chance at life, and then I would find an error and just kill it. I mean, it was that fast. I literally felt bad at how fast I was spinning them up and killing them. But I'll tell you, AWS has changed their pricing. A couple of years ago, it was once you started up an instance, you had to pay for a whole hour. That's the way it used to be. But now it's by the minute. So if you start it up and tear it down, you're fine. So you're not out anything. You just, for some reason, you IT guys get it like me. Something hurts in my heart when I start that server up and immediately kill it. I feel bad. Let's see. DynamoDB is web scale. Okay. SQS and SNS rather than DynamoDB, absolutely. Yes, I would love to use SQS and SNS, and I've used them before, and those work beautifully. But again, I was really forcing myself. I've never used DynamoDB. Every time I tried to use it, I gave up, and I said, no, this time I'm going to force myself to use a steaming pile of, what does this thing cut out? And I did. I got through, I at least used it. So is the user info meant for something like startup script, or does it just happen to allow it? Who asked that, and what do you mean? What do you mean? Where was it at? Where did you see it?
I think he means user data. Like you and user data that you pass to the instance as it
Oh, that
starts
user
up.
data? Yeah, that's the name that Boto3 calls it. That's why I thought it was weird. I actually had a little trouble finding it. And it was one of those weird things to Google. It's like, okay, Boto3, startup script, EC2, and I kept getting, you know how sometimes when you're trying to search something and you just can't figure out how to phrase it to get the right answers? It took a little bit before I finally found a really good answer from somebody that actually explained it. But I agree with you. It's a weird name. Why isn't it startup script? Why is it user data? Because that's what it is. All right, any other questions?